Hello, my dear listeners. Welcome to the Tango Banter, a show dedicated to this strange and complex lifestyle of a social tango dancer. And here we are sifting through all of these interesting things. This podcast has been now going for quite some time, and it's amazing the kinds of stories that I hear from all of you, the kinds of experiences that you're sharing with me. And I've learned that we dancers, and particularly tango dancers, have very specific needs, very specific lifestyle issues that we run into that non-dancers don't really understand. And one thing that I've learned from doing this podcast for just almost 2 years now is that just talking about these things and knowing that other dancers struggle from the same types of issues that we might judge as irrational or strange, or you might feel like you're the only one who's going through something. Just knowing that you're not alone makes a big difference. And in tango, it seems that the more we can individually become empowered and find our path to confidence, to feeling like we belong, the stronger the community grows. And ultimately, no matter who I talk to from the tango community globally, what we all desire is stronger communities with better dancers and better milonga spaces. And I hope that this podcast, in a small but I think pretty relevant way, contributes to that change. And I think this change is very possible. I think it's really, in some ways, I feel optimistic about what's possible once we as dancers just recognize what we want and confront our fears and learn to help each other, So if this podcast has had a positive impact in your life, first of all, I love hearing that. There's many of you who've sent me messages sharing the kind of impact some of the episodes have had on you. Some of you mentioned that you listened to the podcast multiple times. And that's so rewarding for me to hear. So if you do have this experience with my podcast, I would love your help in spreading the word. So please take the time to share the episodes with other dancers who you think might benefit from knowing that they're not alone. Share it on your Facebook feed or post it in your Instagram stories. It would be really awesome to reach more people. I just got my numbers for the Spotify wrap up, since my podcast is also published on Spotify. They give me the different numbers, different data at the end of the year. And I found out that this podcast actually is listened to in 54 countries, which is kind of crazy. So I'm inspired to continue to grow and develop this podcast, and would love your help with that. Now, one thing I know that we all need help with right now this time of year is gifts. I don't know about you, but gifts is a really sore subject for this household. It's always stressful. Every year, I promise myself that I'm going to be responsible and I'm going to do all this work ahead of time. I'm going to make lists. I'm going to buy presents as I see them going through the year. And I got to tell you, I still have yet to fulfill on my promise. But one thing I did do this year was I just started saving business cards and links to various interesting things that caught my attention on social media or something. And if I thought, oh, this would be a really cool gift, I saved it. And, I'm really picky about gifts. I'd rather not buy a gift for someone than buy them a gift that's just generic and thoughtless. So anytime I have to uh, gift something, I spend a lot of time thinking about it, and there's a lot of intention that goes into it for me. So if you happen to be like me, I created a list of 10 non-Amazon gifts that I published on my website. I'm leaving the link in the show notes, so check it out if you're on the market for some gifts for Christmas. Most of the items I listed are actually made by people in my community in LA. So you can go check it out, and feel free to repost it and share with your friends if you know there's other people who would need it. And yeah, let me know what you think. And if you have suggestions, I'm always looking for some more suggestions for gifts, preferably non-Amazon. I know Amazon is like the place to go, and in the end, a lot of my gifts are from Amazon. But if it can be non-Amazon, I always love that. So as I mentioned before, one of the ways this podcast has developed is just through conversation with different dancers, people sending me suggestions for topics or asking me questions, or me just ending up in a conversation at a milonga. And so this particular topic came from a dancer a few months ago who messaged me and said in this kind of cute, jokey way, oh, do you think tango is an addiction? And at first I really took it that way. I'm like, oh, haha. But then she kind of kept talking about it. And, she said that she thought it was a good topic for a podcast. So I've been thinking about it for a few months. And honestly, at first I was like, my initial response was, yes, it is. And then I was like, well, wait, do I need to really think about that? Is there a context where tango, well, you might say, well, no, addiction has all of these things related to it and tango does not. And I was like, no, I think it's pretty true that tango is an addiction, for sure. But then it was like, so what? What's the big deal? So it is an addiction. And it's taken me a few months to come back around to this question and actually tackle it in an episode. So here we go. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about tango and how it is an addiction. So let me first preface that, of course, there's a difference between being addicted to tango versus being addicted to alcohol or a substance of some kind. And I'll mention that throughout. I'm definitely not putting them on the same level. However, when we're thinking about addiction and what it actually shows to us about ourselves, I've come to the conclusion that rather than looking at something out there as a bad thing that causes addiction, I just came to accept this fact that we as humans are addictive creatures. We have addictive behaviors. Can't pretend that it's not there, that we all have addictive qualities, that we want to be addicted to something. We want that channel. And what we choose as a channel for that addictive behavior and how we interact with it is going to be really a personal journey of discovery. I think all addiction can be bad. It can lead to unhealthy behaviors. But some addictions we take for granted, like coffee, for example. I'm definitely addicted to coffee. If I didn't have coffee, I would have a headache and there would be some discomfort. But it's something that I'm okay with. And if I did drink a lot of coffee in one day, I would have some negative consequences for that. So I have to manage my coffee intake. And I think that's going to be the conversation for everyone with whatever people get into. Now, let's leave the part where I'm trying to convince you that tango is an addiction, because some of you might have a strong case for contradicting me and saying that it's not an addiction. But let's pretend that we're going to take that as a premise, that tango is an addiction, and that you're going to accept that it is an addiction in this way that it's a channel, it's a source, it's a resource for us humans to have a conduit, have an expression for our addictive behavior. Let's just say that's the case, and the rest of the episode will flow from that premise. And if by the end of it, you're not satisfied, or if you have a different insight about tango that you want to share, I encourage you to message me on my social media at I am so tango. That's IMSO Tango. You can email me also at connect@imsotango.com. And of course, you're also welcome to join my private Facebook group if you're not already a part of it. The link is in the show notes. The opportunity there for you to interact with me live on banters that I do once a week, and also participate in conversations with other dancers. So that invitation is out there for you. So what I've done is I've divided this topic into 5 aspects, 5 qualities of this addiction called tango that sort of reflect back to us certain truths about ourselves, about who we are as humans. And this is my favorite thing to do. My husband makes fun of me because everything around me and that I experience every day somehow relates back to tango. So the first one is this feeling of passion and intensity that tango brings, right? Like the thing that tango hooks us with is this experience of intense feeling physically. And what that tells me really is that all of us are kind of addicted to intimacy. We all want an access to that part of ourselves that's more about physicality and sensuality. We love physical touch. We love to feel those more sort of primal feelings through the body that we get when we're dancing. Like, I just love, one dancer came up to me and she said, I just love that when I go out on the dance floor, I can just be a slut. And then once the song is over, I'm done and I leave. And she said the word slut with such passion that she was very proud of this notion that she is a woman in her 50s, 60s, is able to sort of allow that part of her to come through and to have a space for that. And maybe you're listening to this and you'd be like, oh, no, I would never want to be a slut. Maybe that's not the correct word to use for what it is for you, but you'll have your equivalent of this feeling that excitement that you get from physical touch and from being in an intimate proximity with another person. One of the books that I read some time ago, I think it was called The Science of Touch. And it was really interesting because it talked about the different structures of nerve cells that we have in the body that have to do with touch. We're apparently very sensitive to touch, and we have very different cells dedicated to different kinds of touch. And there's a particular mechanism in our body to detect the pressure and the sensation of a caress. We're intimately attuned to what is a caress and what is not. And it's so precise. Just imagine it for yourself. I mean, I can definitely feel the truth of that. Is like, if it's a little bit too much, it then does not register as a touch. And if it's a little bit too little, it will not register as I should say, as a caress, not as a touch. It's a touch. But if you want to caress someone, you have to dial it in exactly. And to me, that's endlessly fascinating, because it's like on a physical level, we're primed to really tune in to very particular physical, intimate space with someone we can really interpret. And my theory is that the kind of touch that we experience during the embrace is very much a caress. You know, it's very much of that very special kind of connection. And of course, we're addicted to it. Like everybody, we can't help but be addicted to that. We will seek it out. We seek it out without even knowing it. But for some people, you know, they don't have access to tango, so they'll seek it out in different ways. Now, the second aspect of tango that's kind of addiction inducing, or maybe addiction creating, is this feeling of needing more, right? Needing more all the time. It's not like we're okay just getting it once a month. For some people, once a week is not enough. They need it on a daily basis. And this feeling of routine, of this expectation that we can get a fix. We're going to find that partner. We're going to get our bliss. It's very much of an addictive behavior, I would say, right? That we feel sort of tied to it. And it produces a lot of interesting lifestyles, that's for sure. And what I think it makes tango, social tango, a kind of an interesting phenomenon culturally, globally, is that it can really support a very interesting lifestyle for tango nomads, people who don't live anywhere specific, but just travel from country to country dancing tango all year round. They're just like migrating like birds. And it's kind of an extreme for sure, but there's degrees of that exist for dancers on whatever level, right? Whether it's globally or locally. For many people, this repetitiveness and the expectation of being at the Milonga every week, the routine of it, is part of that positive aspect of addiction in terms of tango, because it keeps you hooked in. You feel you want to go. You feel that you want your fix. You want to see those people. You kind of want to have that predictability. And even though, like tango nomads, they might not have predictability, they might have, you know, this today they're in one city dancing tango and then tomorrow they're somewhere else. But the routine of like nightly or daily or weekly, every few days, you're seeking out this experience. And there's a very interesting and pleasant organizing factor that kind of goes into it. And just like a drug addict who would organize their life according to dealers and where they are in the city and how they're going to get their fix, tango dancers do the same thing. You know, we plan our vacations based on where tango is going to be best a lot of times. And most of the time for me, my vacations are tango events that I go to. And I know for most dancers, most of my friends, it's the same, right? We have this collective schedule that we follow. And it's a really fun part of tango to me, because it makes it so that I see the same people throughout the years over and over again. And I love that aspect of it. And I'm sure, you know, many of you have shared similar sentiment about tango. So that's going to be the second part, this addiction to the routine of it, to getting your fix all the time. Now, the third aspect of tango that can facilitate addictive behavior is this experience of escape. We all desire on a regular basis to unplug, to escape our reality in some way, to go somewhere else. For me, tango has always served this sacred role in my life, because when you go into Malanga, there are no political parties, there's no religion. Of course, people will say there's other issues like gender imbalance and power struggles, whatever. Like, yeah, that's part of it. That's life. But there is a certain level of like, we put down our arms. We're not going to fight right now. We're going to pause our conflict, and we're just going to be in this space where all that matters is that we stay in the line of dance and we connect with our partners and we listen to music and we don't step on anybody's toes. And it becomes very simple. And of course, rightly so, people will call it an escape and maybe even have a critical judgment about that. But I think it's a universal desire to have a break, right? So many dancers have shared with me how going to Malanga is an opportunity for them to process their grief because they just lost a family member, or they have a lot of stress in their work and they're coming there for that purpose of just sort of letting go or processing that stress. Or there's a big life change that's happening, and tango is a place where they can sort of reconnect with something that's a source of strength for them. So it also encompasses this desire for a spiritual fulfillment, I think, too, because many dancers say that they can't meditate, but they dance tango, and that's their meditation. That when they dance, they feel finally that they are at peace and that they are experiencing what they would understand as being that state of stillness in the mind that meditators talk about. So what this really tells me when I think about that is that we all are addicted to feeling good. We are. We all want to feel good on a physical level, on an emotional level. And I think when we go to Malanga and we allow ourselves to go to these places of escape or relieving that stress of everyday life, and we take the time to reset, it allows us to reset physically as well. And I've always said it would be really interesting if we could measure the different levels of hormonal activity going on in tango dancers while we're dancing, and brain activity. Because my guess would be that they would find that there's like a significant release of dopamine, serotonin, the pleasure hormones, and there's probably interesting brain activity that has to do with being at peace and providing all those beautiful emotions that we have dancing. So it's an actual like physically altering our chemistry type of activity, which, that's what we're after when we take drugs too. Like we're wanting to change something about our reality or enhance it in some way. And, I don't really think there's anything wrong with it because we all have that drive. And with tango, this fact that tango makes us feel good on multiple levels. And we are, as human beings, addicted to feeling good, and we will want to seek that out at any cost sometimes. The fourth aspect of tango that facilitates the addictive quality of it, the addiction creating behaviors, is actually the community, the groupiness of tango, the fact that we as dancers, we exist in hives, right? Some people might call them cliques. There are cliques, but I like to think of them as hives. And there's small hives, there's big hives, but I think we all desire on a very deep level to be in a social environment at least some part of the time. I think it's necessary for our physical, basic psychological well-being. And the community that tango creates, just by the way it's structured, can hook people in. And even though, a lot of people go to the milonga and they might sit in the corner and they might not even talk to anyone, but they're still there. And I think that's really amazing that we might not necessarily want to talk to anyone. Like, as an introvert myself, sometimes I go to a milonga and I don't actually want to interact, but I want to be there. I want to sit next to someone. I want to listen to someone. Even yesterday, I actually went to a milonga, and this woman that I haven't seen in a long time, she was feeling particularly chatty, and she, kept engaging with me, kept asking me questions. And I just kind of found myself like, so tired. I don't want to talk. But it was very particular because I wanted to sit next to her. I liked being there, sitting next to her. I just didn't want to talk. And again, I think we can't override our desire to be around people, even if we're super introverted. But then, for other dancers, I know for more extroverted dancers, it's a real lifeline. Like, there are people who get nutty when they spend too much time alone, or they work very intense jobs on computers, and they have to be like inside their brain all day long. I mean, we're all inside our brain, but you know what I mean? Like, they're really analytical. And so for them to go into a social environment, not necessarily to talk, but just to be there, is a necessity, that they can't function without that. In a way, they can't function normally. So I came up with this phrase, alone but together. That's what it feels like, right? At a milonga, is like that you can be alone, but you're together with other people. And even in an embrace, like when we dance tango, it's one of those interesting paradoxes that tango allows us to feel, that I'm very much with my person, like with my partner when I'm in an embrace, but I'm also quite private, quite alone, and I'm having my own experience that has nothing to do with the other person. So that paradox, together, alone but together, I think is one of those magical things about tango that really makes it more addictive in the long run, because the bar for success is pretty low when it comes to like you getting that fix of being social. For some people, it's like, oh, all I got to do is I just go in and I can have a seat and I can listen to music. And, for some people, that's like huge. I remember before tango, the idea of like, let's go to a club. It's like, it's so scary. Like, what do I wear and what do I do? And I know tango can feel scary as well when you've not done it for a while. But like, once you get into it, it's like, man, it's so cool. You can just get that fix of your social fuel that you need for the week or for the day. And then you're good. And, when I was single, that was the key for me. And I know that's going to be the key for me if I'm single again, that's how you go on, right? It's hard if you lose a partner, if you break up and suddenly you have all this time on your hands and the only person you were hanging out with is that person, and all of your friends were your communal, your friends together. It's really tough. So to make sure that you still get that fulfillment of being around someone, around other people, the Milonga space is a really great opportunity for that. I often think back of that feeling I had as a kid, when my parents used to throw these parties at their house, and there would be all this commotion, all these people, they're all getting drunk. And at some point, my dad would pull out his guitar and start playing and singing and crying. There was a lot of crying for some reason. They would all like sing these sad Russian songs and all cry collectively together. It was very sad. But I was a little kid. And I remember eventually I would just like fall asleep on the couch or on the armchair or something. And I always remember this feeling of that safety, that particular safety you feel as a kid when, there's a bunch of adults around you, the lights are on, there's a lot of commotion, but you're safe and you can just like pass out and everything's going to be okay. So I think to some extent, that's what the Milonga provides, is we can experience that as adults. Now, the last thing, that last aspect that I'm going to propose as my defense of this premise comes to a close is the balancing act that tango actually is. And perhaps if there are negative aspects of tango that people want to bring up when they talk about tango and addiction, tango has all of that. To a certain level, maybe tango is not as destructive and it's not so volatile the way substance might be, like alcohol or cocaine or heroin or something. But it can definitely wreak havoc on your life, for sure. It can lead to physical injury and exhaustion, heartbreak, nervous breakdowns. It can lead to breaking up of relationships and losing a job, divorce, unhealthy eating habits, and loss of sleep, and things associated with consistent lifestyle of little sleep and bad eating. Like, it definitely can do a number on you. And just like any addictive substance, you have to find your balance with it. For me, I am the kind of person who really goes all the way in right away, maybe with a little bit of assistance at first, because tango wasn't something that I picked up right away. It didn't really draw me in. But once it did, once I like felt my first glimpses of that magic, there was nothing I would not do. There was no mountain I would not move to get more of it. And I did. At the time when I decided to go to Buenos Aires, because this was my promised land of getting as much of this thing as I wanted. And I know Buenos Aires is still that place for many dancers. I sold my car. I gave away my dogs that I had for 10 years. And I bought a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires. Like, it didn't even occur to me that that was a crazy thing to do. And I hear stories like that all the time. Now, in hindsight, was there a negative consequence to me doing that? Did I hurt some people and hurt myself, perhaps even in certain ways, and sabotaged different areas of my life, and maybe even jeopardized my health and well-being? Yes, all of those things. I totally did that. But eventually I, transitioned to a different phase, and now tango is very different in my life. It's not the same. It doesn't have the same role in my life as it did before. I have a different relationship to it. And I think it's going to continue changing. That's sort of the point of it. But the balancing act that I see other people going through is very similar. Like when I watch young dancers or new dancers who are coming in on the scene and they're getting that bug, they're getting bit. They're falling under the spell, and you can see it in their eyes the first time that somebody experiences that tango high. You see their eyes just sort of change, and you're like, all right. And then you're kind of like looking at your watch. Nobody wears watches anymore, but you're watching the clock going, okay, when are they going to Buenos Aires? Like, sure enough, months later, they're off to Buenos Aires for like a year or something, and maybe they never return. So that's definitely part of the journey for most dancers. And I think that aspect of it makes it the most resemble an addiction. But as I said, for me, I'm glad that's the addiction that I've had. It's paid off in many ways. I've paid my dues for it. I've had to really work with it. It's a double-edged sword, but that's my path. And I think for a lot of dancers, they're willing to make that trade-off. They were willing to sustain the injuries and the pain and the loss of sleep and health so that they can experience these other aspects of tango, because we all want to feel all those things. We want to feel good. So now that I've wrapped up my case for why tango is addictive, or why we're so drawn to tango, and why it brings up so many of our addictive habits, addictive behaviors, I'm curious what you think about that. And if you'd like to shoot me a message, you can reach me on social media. Do make sure to tune in to next week's episode, as it will be the last episode of the year. And I think it will be a special episode. Alex and I are recording one together, so I think you will get a kick out of that. We'll banter with you next week. Until then, ciao.